Hello and welcome, guys, to the Best of Three podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Neville, and I'm joined by Vlad and Tom.
Hello.
Hi.
So, today, guys, we are going to be talking about the February 2018 ban list and what effects we're expecting it to have on tournaments in the coming future. So, basically, first off, we're going to talk about our observations from the list. We're going to look at a few key points that we think are very important. And then we're going to finish off by talking about the decks that we're expecting to see in the coming months at YCSs, regionals, and nationals. So, first off, I think we really want to take a look at Pendulum, which definitely seems to be very heavily affected by the list. So, Vladis, what are your thoughts on what's happened?
So, from what we were looking at before the list was dropped, it was seeming that there's not very many hand traps or many ways to stop the Pendulum deck. Mainly because the deck was so consistent, and there's so many cards that you could just, replace or whatever in the combos, and no other combo got interrupted by many hand traps. But so for those that didn't know, the cards that did get hit in the ban list was Performed by Skullcrabat Joker and Double Iris Magician, which were both just banned, just out of the blue, just completely banned, and it's completely fair to see why. Double Iris was basically the card people were just abusing with Heavy Melfos Electromite. Well, would have been anyway, seeing as we never really got to play it. Well, I guess for the one weekend. But yeah, Double Iris Magician was so strong. Same thing with Skullcrabat Joker, just tutored out anything you needed, and it was just not really good to hand trap anything in the deck because other than Ogre and a few situations, it was really hard to just stop the Pendulum deck for whoever else plays.
Yeah, so what sort of deck do you think, because you've been testing this deck quite a bit at this point, what sort of direction do you think the deck is going to go? Because it's lost a lot of the consistency that it had, right? It loses access to the trap card. Do you think we're going to see the decks moving away from the trap card, or do you think Duelist Alliance is still going to be able to pull that card out? Because the trap card definitely was the strength of Pendulum in the previous format. It was definitely kind of their power card. So, what have you kind of found so far?
I think that there will be some people who will try out the trap card still with Duelist Alliance, and you can probably just play more copies of the trap card and the Star Pendulum Graph, just to be able to be able to tutor out your monsters.
Do you think a Cataville Omen might start seeing play in the deck? You know.
I certainly don't see the cat coming in, but the trap was such an important part of the strategy that deck was running. It was your guaranteed piece of interaction for the opponent's turn, and losing what was the easiest way to get a hold of it is pretty heavy. It is still searchable, but you don't accrue advantage in the same way that you did before when you were searching it.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely seems to be the kind of main takeaway that I have from the list. So,
yeah.
I mean, what sort of boards should people expect from the deck?
So after the list, you'll probably just be expecting cards like Naruto the Moral Leader and Oddai's Vortex Dragon to be summoned. Those cards are pretty easily summonable, because the main monsters you'll be focusing on are Chronograph Sorcerer and Astrograph Sorcerer, which are level 6 and 7 respectively.
I think that the hits to Pendulum sort of set an interesting precedent. Outside of the competitive matches alone, in that they've taken a stance where they've actually hit a newly released deck before it's even had a chance to do anything. So the announcement of the list was the day after the legality date for the set. So we didn't see any events being played with the full power deck before the hits were announced. And that doesn't seem like a direction that they've been too keen to go in the past, and it might be something that we might need to be aware of more going forward rather.
I mean, it's definitely an interesting point. I do feel that we're kind of starting to see this more now, where they're hitting cards that have been out before that would be an important part of strong decks. So, like, when Double Helix came out, they didn't touch Double Helix or any of the new cards, but they touched cards that had been out previously. And while Electrum essentially revitalizes the Pendulum Magician deck, like, we've had Pendulum Magicians since 2015, was it? And then we had the new Magician support for at least the last kind of 9 or 10 months.
Yes, but the hits that we saw to Spiral came after YCS London, whereas in this case, we have 2 YCSs in the near future with Atlanta and Bochum, and the hits have sort of just nipped the Pendulum deck in the bud before it even comes out for those 2 events.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's definitely an interesting direction for them to be taking it. And on the topic of hits to Spiral, the next big part that we want to talk about is, of course, the limitation of Spiral Resort. So, Tom, I think you've been playing a lot of decks that kind of interacted or didn't interact with Spiral Resort. So, what's your kind of takeaway from that limitation?
From the perspective of the Spiral player, obviously you're still going to be playing that one resort and you still want to find it as much as possible, so you'll have the terraformings. I think that leaves you in a position where you need to be playing another field spell. So I expect to see more of the going first Spiral decks with the Dragon Ravines and a set rotation, just to maximize the opportunity to start with a field spell. But that leaves a position where the deck itself is very weak to Ghost Ogre, with Dragon Ravine taking a -1 if it gets Ghost Ogred, and only having a single copy of the resort that you stand to lose if they have it. It puts Spiral in a very fragile position against that card. And as you say, the interaction on the other side of the table is that you're no longer in a position where targeting cards are forced out of the game in quite the same way that they were. So the 60 card deck, where its main piece of interaction is the Fairy Tale Snow from the graveyard, gets a lot stronger when it only has to deal with one Spiral Resort. And likewise, a lot of other decks can consider things like Effect Veiler that just weren't playable when most of the time the Spiral player's monsters weren't targetable.
Yeah, so, I mean, we still see the fact that Spiral has the ability to sit on an untargetable boss monster due to Last Resort. So, do you think that the limiting of Resort is sufficient to knock that deck down, or do you think you would expect to still see it performing well at kind of upcoming events?
I absolutely expect it to still be a top deck, but I don't expect it to be the dominant factor that it was before we saw Resort going to 1.
So no longer the deck to beat then?
No, but obviously we've had other changes as well that completely shakes that up. And that's partly what I'm most excited for in this format going forward, is the fact that there's so much stuff going on, and it's hard to say what's going to come out on top, because there have been subtle hits and changes to the balances of decks and the card choices that previously weren't viable and now might be. That there's just so much that's out in the open at this point, which I'm very excited by.
Yeah, I mean, definitely in terms of how open the format is, I know something that I'm very excited about is that we've seen both Bottomless Trapple and Torrential Tribute be set back to 3 to unlimited on the list. So, like, guys, what are you thinking? Are we going to see these cards coming to the forefront? Are we going to start seeing a format which is slowed down because you have to play through Torrentials? Or do we just not care and we just want to combo out turn 1, and so we're not going to clutter our decks with these trap cards?
I think it's a big deal.
Yeah, I don't think they make like too much of a change to the format, but it makes like as much as I hate saying it, like decks like Paleo have like a few more like trap cards to work with are like playable.
I don't think it's such a big deal for Paleo. Paleozoics have never really been such a big fan of Torrential, certainly, because they want to have traps that they can use to trigger the ones in their grave. And if you chain your Paleo engrave to a Torrential, you're just like, yeah, I'll banish one of my Paleos from grave.
I was meaning more for Bottomless, but
yeah, Bottomless certainly might be like an interesting consideration, but we already had Floodgates, and I don't think Paleo is likely to do anything with evenly running around.
yeah.
And more importantly, one of the most important decks that I see going forward is Trickstar. And they still have 3 light stage, so Unchainable back row is kind of dead right now. You're going to set it, they're going to play their light stage, and they're going to turn off your back row before they do anything else. So you're sat in a position where a card like Bottomless or Torrential is just going to be set to neg.
So you're thinking that we're going to see kind of a resurgence in Trickstar? Because I feel that's a deck which kind of has been ebbing and flowing over the course of the format. So you think it's definitely going to be quite prominent in the upcoming format?
Yeah, I mean, they were very present all throughout the last format. I see what you mean, is they sort of came and went in popularity as the format progressed, but they never really went away altogether, and we see that they haven't been touched. They still have 3 reincarnations and Droll to ruin people's fun and prevent people from enjoying the game, but so long as they have that available to them, someone's going to play it, and they're just as good as they've ever been, if not a little bit better for everything else losing power.
Yeah, it's definitely, we do have a bit of a fear of a power vacuum from what has been hit. So we have 2 more cards that we want to really point out before talking kind of a bit more in depth about those decks that we're expecting. So first off, we have the legendary Monster Reborn returning once again to being 1 on the list. So Tom, do you want to start us off on Monster Reborn?
It has no place in the competitive game. It shouldn't be here. It's here to sell product. It will sell lots of product because people are going to want their Lost Art Ultra Monster Reborns, particularly if they only had like a grotty Monster Reborn common from an old structure deck. Like, yeah, spend 30 quid on product, have a new Monster Reborn, or $30 in US. It'll sell them a lot of cards, but I think that is the competitive game taking a hit for card sales.
So are you thinking this is going to be similar to when we saw Snatch Steel back in the kind of Duelist Alliance Clash of or Duelist Alliance New Challengers format?
Absolutely, or at least I certainly hope so. 1 and done, and that will be all we need to see of it.
Vladis, do you have anything?
I hate this card with a burning passion. I don't think there's any card other than Snatch Steel that I have just literally just don't even like want to play a format just because of a certain card. When Snatch Steel was the one, I kind of still enjoyed that format because like it wasn't that like Snatch Steel was like, you know,
You could
completely unsearchable. You could go like, you know, Hidden Armory and search it, and then, you know, I played that in every deck because, you know, I'm a degenerate. Love playing Denko dolls, but Monster Born is just like really infuriating. Like they made all these like nice hits, like putting Spower Resort to 1, and like, you know, by banning all this pendulum stuff, and then like banning Maxi meme here. But and then they just do this, and it just like makes me like quite sad. But I kind of like understand it because obviously the last option promotion and everything. So whatever. I'm indifferent. I really don't like it. And I know I'm just going to lose every YCS to discard, so
Like,
whatever.
do you guys think it very negatively impacts the format?
Yes.
Yeah, probably.
Do you think that is kind of amplified due to how it interacts with links? Or do you think regardless of whether this was before or after links, it is just such a distorting card that when it is drawn, it is very strong? Because arguably, if you are going first, surely Monster Reborn is only as strong for a player as a card like Soul Charge, right? And we see Soul Charge not being played in every deck.
That's because Soul Charge is only that strong going first on the first turn. Monster Reborn, you can have nothing and be in the last turn of time, draw a Monster Reborn, flick through the grave. Oh, you've got a Borreload Dragon in your graveyard. Yeah, I'm gonna take that Borreload Dragon. I'm gonna take the biggest thing on your field. I'm gonna attack over your other monster, and I now have a 3,000 untargetable stick, your biggest monster, and I've wiped out your board. Good luck.
They can't take your Borreload if you never summon a Borreload.
Talking about taking other people's cards, the final card that we really want to talk about is Mind Control. And this is a card that I'm really excited about. I'd been, like, between Mind Control, Enemy Controller, and the original Brain Control, and Change of Heart. Like, these are really strong effects, and the fact that Mind Control is no longer limited by a card like Spiral Resort, because I don't know about you guys, but in the previous format I was constantly like, oh, Mind Control would be kind of a really decent side card, and then you remember Resort and you say, okay, never mind. What are you thinking? Like, Tom, what's your expectations for this card?
I don't know where Mind Control sits exactly right now. I know that at some point that card is going to get very good. The ability to take any card and use it guaranteed for a link fodder, so you can be absolutely certain that you aren't going to have to give it back at the end of the turn, is just very, very powerful. And with links being able to climb up through the link ratings, so even if you take a link monster, you can just use it to make something even bigger. It's inevitable that at some point it's going to be a very strong card. I don't know if it will be right away, but it's going to happen, and it's only going to get stronger as we get more link monsters available to use.
But do you not think that this could have similar issues to Monster Reborn? So, okay, you do have the issue that Mind Control is not good if you open it in your starting hand. And in a very late game scenario where it is your top deck and you have nothing else established, it's not very strong. But this seems like a complete blowout card in mid game, surely.
It's a very powerful card, and it will be a huge part of loads of possibly stronger than they should be 2-card combos, but the whole game is full of very strong 2-card combos. Mind Control is out of theme, it's unreliable, and it doesn't build your combos without relying on your opponent in some way. So I think that it's very strong and a really interesting card to consider, but I don't see it being nearly so much of a problem as Monster Reborn being like a top deck that will completely swing the game.
Just to add to another point for like Mind Control, I wouldn't say it's like a main deck card per se. I'd say it's probably like one of, if not like one of the strongest like going second cards, because depending on obviously the meta again, if boards are like somewhat weak to Mind Control, or like even like a little bit, like Mind Control can just like completely like blow them out. Like imagine just like taking your opponent's like Baguska or something with Mind Control, and then you just like switch to attack mode. So it's quite good. Like it's like removal, and also just gives you a dude. So it's like quite cool.
Okay, so I think we've kind of covered everything that we want to talk about the changes. There are quite a few more changes, but we're not going to really focus on them. But before we move on to the last segment of kind of talking about the decks to expect, I just want to know, like, coming out of the list, there are some hits that you guys seem really positive on, and some hits that you seem quite negative on. Where do you guys stand overall? Do you think this is a list that makes you excited for playing the format? Are you anxious? Or yeah, where are you guys sitting?
I think this is the best list we've seen for a long time. Monster Reborn is a bit of salt on an otherwise beautiful cake, but I really like it, and I'm very excited by it.
I would say is the pepper put on the cake, but yeah, same.
Okay, well, we are going to now move on to talking about what we expect the kind of best decks to watch out for in the upcoming formats. So I'm going to take a deck from you guys one at a time each. So Tom, would you like to present your first deck that you're kind of looking forward to seeing at YCS Welcome?
I think we'll be seeing a lot more of the lawn mowing 60 card deck. As I say, Fairy Tale Snow, really big part of that deck, and got absolutely neutered by the prevalence of Spiral Resort. It just became, but with that card taking a little bit of a backseat, obviously we'll still see it and it will be a huge inconvenience, but it's much less common now, and the 60 card deck was already great and it's only getting better here.
So you're talking specifically about 60 card Lightsworn here as opposed to 60 card Infernoid, or do you think both builds are going to kind of see prevalence?
Well, I hold back from saying Lightsworn because that deck is so many things. Like the plant, zombie, Lightsworn, whatever you want to call it deck.
The like all the best cards that I can play under a 60 card limit deck. That one.
Yeah.
So you're not as kind of you're not expecting Infernoid to do the same, are you?
It could do. I haven't personally expected anything of it, but at this point the format's so wide open that anything that was just below the cusp of the previous format is now likely to be at the top of this one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think, some people I think still think Pendulum's not very good for next format. I think it's quite good still. Electromite is such a broken card.
So you're still on Pendulum.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what Pendulum deck yet as per se. I need to probably test a bit more of the format, but it can be either Zephyr or some kind of amalgamation of every Pendulum deck possible.
Just not Clifford.
Yeah, just not Clifford. God no, please no. No. Getting flashbacks here.
Dynamist Turbo at YCS near you.
If you don't stop talking, I'll find where you live. Right. No, but for real though, with Solemn Judgment being back as well, we didn't really touch on that, but Guiding Ariadne has a new search target, woo. So Guiding Ariadne might be a new thing you can play in Pendulum decks, maybe Nelthos or something. So yeah, that could be a thing you could see, or some other Pendulum deck with the Mythical Beast stuff, or you can still see people playing attempting to, I guess, trying to play Pendulum Magicians. So yeah, I think that deck's still quite good.
So you're thinking basically we don't know what Pendulum deck we're going to see yet, but it's definitely not.
Yeah, there's one there. There's one there somewhere, probably.
At least one there.
Yeah, at least one. So
what? Just to take us a bit off topic, but the last time we saw Pendulum prevalent, we saw a lot of anti-spell fragrance going about, and I know a lot of players were quite upset about how prevalent the card was. Do you think people can afford to play anti-spell fragrance in the upcoming format, or do you think it's something that Pendulum doesn't really have to worry about anymore?
I think it's a great side deck card if we start seeing Pendulum about. I don't think that I would be brave enough to main it going into the start of the format when things are so wide open, simply because I don't know what I'm going to be playing against at this point.
Activate Dimensional Barrier. I will declare Pendulum. Would you like to pass your turn, sir?
Cool. So there's clearly a lot of kind of strong interaction with Pendulum about at the moment.
There's so many anti-Pendulum cards. It's not even funny.
Wavering Eyes.
I just hate that team. Oh my god. Wait, triple Wavering Eyes, Unending Nightmare. That's the only thing I'm not looking forward to if I'd be playing Pendulum at an event. Cards like Anti-Spell, Dimensional Barrier, just not very fun to play
But
against.
you think the deck is still strong enough to play?
Yeah, maybe. So someone will probably break Pendulum. I don't know. I'm just a cameraman.
So, Tom, do you have any other decks that you'd like to kind of present into the spotlight?
Everyone's favorite deck to be sat down at the table next to, so you don't have to play against them. Trickstars. Yeah, I think that they were just about good enough last format. They were doing better than I was happy with, and they haven't taken any hits, so they're still going to be there. I'm not happy about that. I guess perhaps in an ideal world, the list would have just tapped them a little bit. Maybe if Reincarnation had taken a hit, so you'd see less of the double Reincarnation Droll, which is everyone's least favorite way to play a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Yeah, I don't like the deck, but it'll still be there.
Do you think the build is going to change much, or do you think it's effectively going to be pretty much the same list? Because I think during the last format there wasn't much variation in Trickstar from what I saw. It was mainly the kind of same. It had like X amount of spells, there was Field Spell, Terraforming, Scapegoat, Tree of the Trap, and then the monster lineup.
No, I'm sure this is incredibly prejudiced, but in my mind, the boat of people that head towards playing Trickstar aren't going to be the biggest deck innovators in the metagame, so I don't think anything's going to be shaken up too rapidly. Maybe some things will change, but at a guess, I'd say it's probably going to be about what it was beforehand.
I probably disagree a little bit there. There is a few variations in the Trickstar deck. Some play Eater Millions, some play no Eater Millions, so it's a bit different there, but
Quite
yeah, other than that, there's like not much of a difference. Eater Millions is like quite a different card though.
You think it's kind of a nice, safe deck to be playing in the format then?
Yeah, probably.
Vladis, do you have any more decks you want to point out?
No.
Tom, do you have any more decks you would like to point out?
I think that we could see a little bit more action from things like Invoked, things like
Alphabet Soup.
True Draco, my old favourite, the ABCs, might come out the woodwork a little bit. Yeah.
Do you guys expect anything from Dinosaurs? Because, I mean, we've not seen much from that deck in a little while. It's just gotten a new boss monster.
Really hurts not having Denglong.
Yes, that's true.
The deck's cool, but I'm not entirely sure how meta viable it is.
Right, so it's a case of we're going to have to see what that won after kind of more testing and such, or you just don't think
yeah,
it matches
sure.
well?
It's probably worth testing.
I think the biggest thing for me going forward is I'm quite excited to potentially see like 10 different decks in the top cut of Atlanta. Maybe that's ambitious, but if we could see something like that going on, I would be excited going on into Bochum the following week, just seeing what everyone scrambles to put together with what they've learned from that first big event.
It does feel like a very open list. It's one of those lists where, from my point of view anyway, it definitely feels like we're playing in the TCG, and like, because we often have lists where we're essentially playing a solved format that the OCG have basically solved. We've taken our kind of own play style and adapted it to that. But this format definitely seems it's a place where deck building is really rewarded, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's definite possibility for some guy in America to realize that so-and-so, like, I don't know, Demise, Zephyr, Trap Card, everything, probably not, but some randy deck that no one else has thought of is just a perfect fit for this metagame, and he'll storm through Atlanta and get a win with no one else topping with the same deck. And that would be very exciting, because an unpopular deck winning an event could really shake up the metagame that we see the following week.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited for this format. It's the sort of format where I would love to be able to spend kind of 10 hours a day testing different decks because there's just so much space for creativity. And I'm really excited to see what both the American community and the European community manage to do with what we have. So I think we've pretty much come to the end. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening to us. We've been the Best of Three podcast. So from myself, Tom, and Vladis, we're going to say have a good one, and we'll see you next week.
Bandmaster Reborn.